No worries.
positivity and spreading love. Like, we need to lift each other up. So it's so
Yes.
amazing, you know?
Yes. I agree. Totally agree. That's a
Absolutely.
great way to start the podcast.
Well, this is Church After Hours podcast with my brother Curtis Kareem. We have a very special guest today who's here with us. A cat that I met through a person who's like a friend and a family member now, Godfrey, who's from the hometown and who has been, one of the best comics, in my opinion, in the game. And I saw this cat on his podcast. And the first few times I seen him, they were just talking comedy, doing what comics do. And then I think it was the third or fourth time. It was in October when this conflict between Israel and Palestine had started to take place, right in the genesis of the conflict. And he came on and he was speaking, and I was like, wow, I had never really heard a young cat from his community speak like he spoke. And that's our guest today, Mr. Jonathan Randall. Jonathan, introduce yourself to the people, man.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jonathan Randall. Thank you for having me. I'm a comedian, actor, writer, activist, content creator, overall, just, performer, and, without sounding too pretentious, artist, living in New York City. I just want to say, of course, that the conflict, if you even want to call it that, started way before October 7th. I think that's important. People want to make it seem like it just started then, but it did not. It's been going on 75 years. And even calling it a conflict is really kind of crazy because, one side has one of the most advanced militaries in the world and the other side doesn't. And so it's not very like an equal footing conflict. It's definitely a problem. It's hard to find the perfect words. Sometimes I say conflict too, and then I'm like, I really shouldn't say that. But, the problems in the Middle East, the troubles in the Middle East, or just the oppression of the Palestinian people in the Middle East might be like the best way to put it. But I am Jewish. I grew up in a modern Orthodox family in Miami Beach, Florida. I've spent time in Israel, and I believe very strongly in Palestinian human rights. And frankly, I have felt more of a connection with Judaism, speaking out on behalf of the oppressed, speaking out against the occupation, that I really believe I've ever actually felt in my life.
I can understand that. Yeah.
This is gonna be a great interview, man, because I like the fact that you kind of corrected me in love, and I really didn't want to use conflict, but when you're having these type of conversations, you want to be respectful, but we're going to be truthful and honest more than anything. So let's go back to the genesis, because I think you said this started 75 years ago, and I honestly think it started a little bit before then, and you can give me your thoughts. Let's go back to a cat who some people call the father of Zionism, and a cat named Theodore Herzl, how he had this plan to make what is now Israel back in the early 1900s before he passed away. Talk about him and the origins of Zionism and how Israel is set up today as we see it.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to mention that Jewish people have always had a connection to that area of the land.
Absolutely.
So, Jewish people have been there for thousands of years. Jewish people are tied to that land. Of course, a lot of Jewish people had left that land, I do not think it is an argument at all or a reason that because someone that believed in the same thing that you believed 3,000 years ago lives somewhere, you have more of a right to go to that land than people that have been living there for generations. Like, I don't think that's a thing, And I don't think people could either rely on, in the Bible, of course, Abraham made a covenant with God, and God promised him the land of Israel. I don't believe that, that is justification either for like people being like, this is ours over opposed to people that live there. But Theodore Herzl, the concept of Zionism was around before Theodore Herzl, but the modern movement of political Zionism as we know it was really developed by Theodore Herzl, who was born in Hungary, I believe.
Yes, he was.
And he grew up in Europe. He was Jewish, but he was an atheist, actually.
Absolutely. That was the next direction I was going to go into. But yes, you're right.
Yeah, he didn't believe, but of course, in Europe at that time, there was tremendous anti-Semitism. Before the Holocaust, there was, the Jewish problem, as they called it.
Absolutely.
And Jews faced like real anti-Semitism. Something that's going on a lot now is people want to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is incredibly dangerous. It takes attention away from anti-Semitism, and it gives people that are pro-Israel or, Zionists, for lack of a better word, what a lot of people like to call them, justification for the dehumanization of the Palestinian people, for the occupation, and for the current genocide that we're having right now. But, Theodor Herzl, he wrote like an essay, which became very popular, talking about establishing a Jewish state in, the ancestral Holy Land. It became very popular. This was all even like before kind of really like the Holocaust really was like going on and in full swing. Of course there were anti-Semites in Europe, of course, that wanted to get rid of the Jews. This was music to their ears. Yeah, let's get all the Jews out and put them somewhere else. The Balfour Declaration, of course, it predated, 1948. The Peel Commission, it predated 1948. These were anti-Semites, Balfour, Peel. They were anti-Semites. They wanted to get rid of the Jews.
Right.
They also were, what people now will call Christian Zionists. Of course, evangelical people they believe in this prophecy of end of times, that a certain amount of Jews need to go to the Holy Land. There's going to be a holy war between them and the Muslims. Like, they're all going to die, and this is going to bring back the second coming of Jesus. And the Jews are kind of being used in this way, and they don't really realize it. But, Theodor Herzl came up with the modern day political movement of Zionism. And of course, the Jewish people love this idea. They didn't want to be in Europe where they were facing so much discrimination, so much bigotry, so much hatred on like a regular basis. And they wanted to go to a place where they could have their own. And what better place than the Israel that they've heard about in the Bible, that God promised Abraham, that Moses delivered the Jews to after the Exodus from Egypt. Right. And all the other, Bible stories where King David has his kingdom, where the two holy Jewish temples, what is called the Beis Hamikdashes, they were there, and they wanted to do that, but they didn't really have any consideration for the fact that there were people that have been living on this land for generations and who considered this land their home.
Absolutely.
And those people being
the Palestinian people. Well,
at that time,
I don't know, like, when the Ottoman Empire and the British, and they it was kind of like the Ottoman Empire, and then when the Ottoman Empire went, away, the British took over. It became the British Mandate of Palestine. It had been called Palestine before. The Palestine, when they became this identity, when they tried to develop their own national identity, it really didn't happen kind of till later, but it was because they weren't looking for like divisions and things like, we're Jews, you're Arabs, you're this, you're that, we're this kind of Palestinian, we're that kind of Palestinian. Sure. I feel like that was more of a Western influence, whereas like, who are you? What are you? We're this, you're that.
Sure.
But, they were the people that lived on the land for generations, and now they definitely do identify as being Palestinian people, and they're there. And honestly, a lot of people want to, you go into chat rooms, you look into comments, and you'll just see people arguing about, well, we were here, this was here first, we were here first, this. And honestly, I kind of feel like at this point it's a moot point, because there are millions of people that live there, that have lived there for generations, whose families have lived there, parents, grandparents, great-parents, great-great-grandparents. They work the land, they farm the land, and this is their home, and they are there now, and they are suffering, and they have been suffering. And unfortunately, a lot of that suffering has been done in the name of Judaism, which is not in the spirit of the religion. I mean, if you just go straight to the 10 Commandments alone, it's like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet another god.
Right.
I believe that Israel people are coveting it. They treat it like a modern day golden calf is something that I've discussed a lot.
Yes,
Yeah,
you have.
Jonathan,
Problem.
I see that you are pretty passionate about, you know, the genocide is a better word. I love that you use that. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the reason that Americans seem not to be as interested, or it's only one side, two-part questions, or it's only one side being told in America through media?
I believe, there are a lot of Americans that are interested. More and more Americans are waking up. A lot
Yeah,
of more
that
and
is
more
true.
young
Yes.
Jews are waking up. I'm sure we've all seen protests from organizations like If Not Now and Jewish Voices for Peace that are being incredibly vocal about stepping up. America, first of all, America has a horrible history. I mean, America was built on colonization.
Mhm.
One, America also has a horrible history in the Middle East of not valuing Arab life, of not valuing brown people life. I mean, it has that in America as well.
Absolutely.
Racism is still alive today, which is very unfortunate. And even as far as we've come, from the times of slavery, from the Jim Crow era, it still is very prevalent. And I don't know a Black person that doesn't experience racism and bigotry on a daily basis. And it's very unfortunate. So there is that aspect of it. There is that aspect of us versus them and the other. Of course, Western media, what we've been told is very one-sided.
Mhm.
They talk about, how the way they present Palestinians. I think one example that's recently happened, a 4-year-old Palestinian girl was shot in the West Bank by Israeli soldiers when they opened up fire without any disregard for other Palestinians around. And apparently news sources are calling her like a young woman. And she was a 4-year-old girl. She's not a young woman, but they have different names for if Israelis die, one thing, if it's Palestinians, die, it's another thing. So Israelis get killed, Palestinians die, and also, America wants to have an outpost in the Middle East. They want to
Right.
disrupt the Middle
Right.
East.
There we
True.
go.
America does have an
Okay.
innate
There we
fear
go.
of Islam,
Yeah.
and they want to put the Western values in that area of the world. And also, it doesn't hurt that, it has to do with our military complex. And, people are starting to realize that our tax dollars are going to this country, Israel, where they're using them to murder people, but also they have so many freedoms that, we don't have, or they're having things like we don't have, like free healthcare, free education, like
Right.
college.
Sure.
And Americans are like suffering and don't have those things. So, people are starting to wake up a little more, but it has a lot to do, I believe, with those things. And of course, there are lobbyists like AIPAC that, are funneling into our government and influencing our government
Yep.
to have support for Israel, and having politicians that will, blindly support Israel. And it's all taking away our freedoms. There's an amazing documentary called Boycott, which talks
Boycott.
about
Okay.
how, you can't boycott Israel in a lot of states. And
Oh,
that's kind
wow.
of crazy how you could, speak up and boycott America, but you can't do that to Israel, and taking away what should be part of our First Amendment right, which is to boycott, which was tied to, the end of segregation and stuff like that, where
That's
that
right.
was the right that we had. And then because of Israel's influence, we've lost that in over half the states. And that's insane.
Right. Right. Yeah, Jonathan. So what the second part of that question, why do you think that we only hear one side of this story on our media?
I think it's just why we only hear one side of, of every media story. It's not only with Israel. I think it also has to do, with when it comes to Black people, when it comes to any minority, when it comes to any other places in the Middle East, weapons of mass destruction. They lie to us about that too.
That's right.
To promote wars. So I think it's because, there are a lot of, of course, people that are very pro-Israel in media sources, media
Okay.
places,
Yeah.
of course, that are promoting that. And I think it also just has to do with people want to believe that because of the innate Islamophobia, like I mentioned, and people are starting to wake up. But also, like, people want to say, oh, Israel likes to say it's the only democracy in the Middle East, and then they like to paint Palestinians as a bunch of terrorists that are throwing gay people and women off roofs. So it's like, of course, Americans are gonna be like, oh, well, we got to go with the I know a Jewish person. I don't know any people from Palestine. Like, that's
Right.
all they know, and they believe that. So I just think like it has to do with all these different factors coming together that like a lot of the mainstream media can't be trusted, and they are promoting other people's agenda. This whole thing,
That's
this
right.
whole division, this whole thing, us versus them, you, me, seeing people as the other, feeling that they're threats because of the others, it's exploited by people to profit off of. And these people are tied to our news and how we get our media and big conglomerates. And, they want us to be at odds because it makes it easier for us to be controlled by them.
That's
and
right.
them to profit off us.
Yep. I was talking to some young people. I work at a rec center, assistant director, and I was talking to some young kids yesterday about the same thing, how, young whites, young blacks, it doesn't matter. When we're at odds, it's great for them because when there's confusion, we're easily controlled at that point. But yet when we come together, when you look at guys like, Fred Hampton Jr., how he was bringing the poor whites and the blacks and the Latin kids together back in Chicago in the 60s, that had to be broken up because those guys, once they talk to each other, they seem they have more in common. You know what I'm saying? Than any differences. But one thing I want to go back to, and I want to continue staying on this path, but I want to go back to Zionism because I know a lot of people that watch our podcast, they may not understand the difference between Zionism and Judaism. And we've been hearing that word a lot more or recent since, things started back in October. Can you explain in layman's terms the difference between Judaism and Zionism for a person that may not understand what that word means?
Well, Judaism is a religion. It's over 5,000 years old. It's based on the Old Testament that the Jewish people call the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
And Zionism is a political movement. At its core, Zionism just really means about, the Jewish people establishing a home in their Holy Land, in the state of Israel. And people interpret Zionism like in different ways. And of course, like there's nothing wrong with Jews living in Israel, but I think where Zionism really went wrong is being like that it wants to be a Jewish state. And this is the Holy Land. This is a place
That's right.
where Christians, this is a place where Muslims, they have strong ties. I mean, Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Al-Aqsa is like the third holiest site to Islam. And of course, Jews have now the Western Wall, the last remaining parts of the Holy Temple that I mentioned, and have been there forever. And, Israel needs to be a place for all people, no matter what your religion is. I believe, I'm not a very religious person. I do identify more as like an agnostic, but I truly believe that, though he may be known by different names, there is only one creator. There is only one greater power. And until all of its people are united together, like we will never know the grace that's awaiting for us and the evolution that can come by being united as a people. Like it makes no sense that, Jews and Arabs, Jews and Muslims, Jews and Palestinians, Israelis and Palestinians are even fighting. They have so much more in common. And if you want to go back to the biblical text, with Abraham, he had two sons. One was Ishmael, one
Israel
was
and
Isaac.
Isaac.
Isaac's
That's right.
son was Jacob, also known as Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. From Ishmael came the Arab people and the Muslim people. And it's like, based on the Bible, it's like this is the longest family feud ever, and it needs to come to an end.
Absolutely.
So, Zionism is a political movement. Judaism is a religion. Not all Jews are Zionists.
That's right.
Not all Zionists are even Jews. There
That's
are
right.
Christian
That's
Zionists
right.
as well.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
right.
glad, Jonathan. I'm glad you said that because we do want to let our, Jewish brothers and sisters know that we do have love for them. And my
Absolutely.
background is Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is a heavily, influential by Judaism or Jewish city, starting with Isaac Wise. Okay.
I know about Wise potato chips.
Yeah. Well, there's
Those are pretty delicious. I'm pretty down with those.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a big Jewish community. Actually, a lot of the buildings, the architecture here in Cincinnati is German. German architecture, and so there's a lot of Jewish influence in Cincinnati.
I mean, Jews usually aren't a big fan when Germans build things for us, but okay.
well, I think it was more so at that time. That was just their architecture.
Right. No, for
when
sure,
they came here.
I heard you saying. I was just trying to make a little joke. But
no. I totally.
It's important. It's important for people to realize
that
there have always been Jews in Israel. Now they're called Mizrahi Jews.
Yes.
And they're kind of like Jews or even Sephardic Jews.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the problem is the Ashkenazi Jews, the white Jews that came over. It's always the white guy that's causing the problem. That came over like in 1948. That's a lot more of issues because, prior to 1948, while there were things like the Hebron massacre and other instances that were bad and there was violence against Jews, for the most part, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, they were all living together in peace and harmony.
Yeah. And I like that you said that. Now, and I'm going to let you go, D, because I know you want to say something. Good. But I know you remember the book we read about race, and it seems like all these things were happening at the same time.
Yes, they were.
When white and black and race became a strong part. It affected everything. So it affected, religions. It affected political. It affected our country heavily, and it spread around the world. So I like that you're pointing that out and differentiating between, race and religion and all these different things.
And culture as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's important because, there is a sentiment. It's like they all got to go back to where they came from. And it's like there were lots of Jews that were living there already. And not only that, but there were Jews that were expelled from like nearly every Middle Eastern country that there is. And they kicked all the Jews out. And it's like they don't have any other place to go. That's the only place to go. But the problem is being like it's the place that's only for them. It's got to be a place for all people. Certainly, the people who have been living there for generations have more of a right than like some person in Brooklyn just because they're Jewish. There's a thing that the Jews have. It's called birthright, where it's basically any Jewish person could go to Israel on a trip. I did it. I went on it.
Yeah,
that's just kind of crazy. What? No, why is it my birthright? My ancestry is Russian Polish. It's not from that area of the world. It's from Russian Polish.
Jonathan, when is the last time you have actually, been in Israel?
I haven't been there in probably over 15 years.
Okay. So everything that you're hearing about this situation, is it from a family member or is it from someone close to you?
No, I mean, I do hear things from family members, from friends, but I do a lot of research. And that's where I really get my information. You cannot trust anything you hear if it's just coming from a family or if it's just coming from a friend. I think actually a good example of that is my mother. She's more of a traditional Jewish person. She's not very religious, but she considers herself traditional. She is more of a conservative Republican. But she was telling me, oh my gosh, Jonathan. Oh, they were murdering tons of babies. I'm like, Mom, that's not
that
true.
propaganda.
And she's like, well, my friend's cousin lives in Israel, and they told me it's true. I'm like, Mom, here's the list of everybody that was killed. They have it. There was one baby killed on October 7th. Her name was Mila Cohen. She was 9 months old. She was shot. Very unfortunate, very sad. She shouldn't have had to die. I'm against that she died. But just like you can't believe, oh, well, my friend's cousin said they killed so many of these. There were rumors of the 40 babies being beheaded.
Yeah,
these were just horrible lies. And like
you guys debunked that on Godfrey's podcast.
Yeah. So it's really sad, and people still believe that. So you really gotta try to dig deep into the news and do your own research. I like to get my news from different articles, and I also like to read articles, that aren't only like, let's say, a liberal more news network. I will read the liberal more news network and the conservative
That's right.
news
You got to
network.
do both. You got to
Yeah,
do
so
both.
you get a more well-rounded picture.
Balance.
I'll read the Israeli newspapers and see what they're saying about a story, and then I'll read what Middle East Eye or Al Jazeera has to say, because you can't just trust one source, and you especially can't just trust the source that's telling you like the news that you want to hear or has the same political views that you do.
That's called doing your due diligence. And I'm glad that you said that about having people on the ground, because Nina talked about having relatives that was reporting things back to her that mainstream media wasn't reporting, that was going on, from her side of things,
There we go.
dealing with Palestinians. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And let's stick with 1948. We mentioned 1948. And again, for people that may have come to this conversation today and don't really know a lot about this information, talk about what happened in 1948 and why we still are experiencing some of the things that initially happened when 1948 happened, when Israel was established as we know it today.
Even prior to the establishment of Israel, Zionists and people that like what Theodor Herzl said, and then these Zionist groups started forming, and they started trying to funnel people into the Holy Land,
right,
into the British Mandate of Palestine. There were problems then. There, the things like the bombing of the King David Hotel with Jewish militant groups that were basically kind of terrorists, that they were doing things because they wanted the land. Of course, after 1948, we had just witnessed one of the greatest atrocities that we have in this world, the Holocaust, where over 11 million people were murdered, including 6 million Jews. There are also other people that were also killed that were considered the others. But 6 million Jews really affected the Jewish people. Horrible atrocities that you can't even imagine, sent to gas chambers, death camps, just like the disgusting things that happened to them. And after that happened, this idea that had been going on for a long time of this Jewish homeland, of Zionism, now the UN really stepped in. The UN had just formed, and they came up with this partition plan, which was going to divide the land that was formerly known as the British Mandate of Palestine, and they were going to give some of it to the Jewish people and some of it to the Arab people. And of course, the Arab people that were living there were like, WTF, why you get I think 10% of the area was Jewish at that time, and then they wanted to kind of split it nearly 50-50 or whatever.
Right.
And they were like, hell no, we don't want this. But there were a bunch of Jewish militias that went over to Palestine, and they expelled over 750 Palestinians. They committed horrible atrocities like Tantura, an amazing documentary. And
Tantura, great documentary. I had that down. Yep, great documentary.
There's another big massacre called Deir Yassin, which I encourage people to Google and look up. And they murdered tons of Palestinians. They forced, like I said, 750,000 from the land, and they established a state of Israel. And, of course, a lot of the neighboring Arab countries, they try to fight. It wasn't a unified fight. It wasn't like they all got together, these Arab countries, and formed a big Voltron of Jew haters.
They were just protecting their sections
and started killing them. Well, they were coming from different ways, and they had their own interests at heart. And and some of the Zionist militias even made deals with them. Hey, if you don't attack from this area, we won't do this. And if you don't do that, and Jewish people are very smart. No one's going to say they're not. We have more Nobel Prize peace winners and everything, and we use the smarts, and we also use funding that we were getting from England and from America and people like the Rothschilds. Unfortunately, it took even more of the land that was part of the partition plan, and it started, I guess, a series of events, and it started this creating this environment of oppression and bigotry and of the other, and having Jews, Israelis versus Palestinians. And then in 1948, Israel declared itself a state and it became a state.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned Centurion. That was a documentary that I've been posting and telling people to check out for a while now. And it's another great documentary that touches on this called Creation and Catastrophe. I don't know if you had a chance to see that one yet.
Yes, I saw that one too. That's great. That's based on a lot of the work by Benny Morris, who is an Israeli historian who people should check out. Who's one of the few people that really got access to Israel's archives. They don't want anyone seeing this. Ben Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel, he actually was very famous for not wanting to write anything down because he knew that like history would get those documents and then they would see and they would know. And he created Hasbara, which is kind of like Israel's PR team. And
That's right.
The amount of lies and propaganda that has come out over the years, including their story of what happened in 1948. And they'll like to say, oh, no, the Palestinians just got up and left, you know, which is not true.
Not true.
Benny
That's
Morris and Ilan Papi and these other historians came and they started setting the record straight. They were called the new historians.
That's right.
And now what they've said and what they've released is widely known as actually the truth, even though there are plenty of people that still don't believe it. But even in Israel, a lot of them believe, you know, what Benny Morris, even though, of course, he's been shunned and because of exposing, you know, the truth, because they want to keep propagating these lies.
That's right.
Yeah, I do want to agree with Jonathan when he says that, you know, Jewish people are smart. I totally agree.
Thank you. You better. It'd be stupid of you not to.
Yeah, but I don't want to, miss out on the very intelligent people that built those pyramids over into modern day Egypt.
The Jews built those pyramids.
Yeah, and they also gave out those Nobel Peace Prizes that you talked about.
Fact.
They got the
That's
most of. So if I'm giving
even
out,
Albert Einstein, probably known as one of the most brilliant Jews ever, he was against Zionism and he foresee what the problem was with Zionism. And there's letters that he signed and there's letters that he wrote where he was speaking out against Zionism and he didn't want to support Zionism. They actually asked him to be like one of the first presidents of Israel and he turned it down.
Why? And I asked you before, why don't Americans care? But why should Americans care? How is this affecting people in America?
Well, first of all, I definitely want to agree with you and say, yes, you know, African Americans, Black people, you know, they have contributed so much, not only scientifically, you know, not only people like George Washington Carver, but culturally, it has been so significant. Art, you know, music, fashion, film, like
absolutely
it's incredible.
Thank you.
How they have lifted up the whole world, really, culturally, because of the amazing influence that they have had. And it's you know, it's
preach, brother, preach, as they say in the church.
And not to cut you off, we talked about it last week about how there was a brother that created the airplane, but the Wright brothers got credit before he did. So it's funny y'all talking about this. Godfrey just talked about this last week with Dante and Nina.
But back to my question, Jonathan, why do you think Americans should care about what's going on?
Well, first of all, everybody should care when people are being oppressed.
Yes.
When people are not having freedom, when people are being murdered, when people are being discriminated against just because of who they are. Everybody should care. And certainly America should care, who considers itself a bastion of freedom.
There you go.
You know, the greatest country in the world and all that. Like, definitely America should care. But even more than that, you know, like I had mentioned before, our tax dollars go to Israel. We've sent billions of dollars to Israel. We've sent more money to Israel since 1948 than any country in the world.
And it's not even close.
Not even close. And like I said, you know, there are people get free health care. There are people get higher education for free. Those are things that our people should have. Those are people that the country that says it's the greatest country in the world.
On earth.
To me, the greatest country in the world is one that takes care of its own people. That its own people aren't going into debt because they were sick or they needed an operation. You know, like the greatest country takes care of the poor and it wants to make sure that we're educated and that we're the smartest. And beyond that, like I was talking about, AIPAC, a lobbying group, it is influencing our politicians. It is influencing our laws.
That's right.
In New York City alone, there's an organization called Not on Our Dime, because there are all these other these Jewish organizations, Zionist organizations, pro-Israel organizations, whatever you want to call them, that are being subsidized and saying that they're charities and they're they're exempt from paying taxes. And what they're doing is they're funneling money in Israel that is encouraging and helping support the settler movement in the West Bank that are, doing violence against Palestinians on a daily basis, that are dispossessing Palestinians, kicking them out of their homes and taking it over. And, we got to stand up as Americans and not allow this to happen, not allow our tax dollars to be used for the genocide that's currently happening right now, to send weapons to Israel so they can kill the, Palestinians. So Israeli children could be writing their names on the bombs, on American bombs that are going to be dropping on Gaza, that are causing Palestinian children to write their names on their bodies so they could be identified
and remembered. Yeah. And I want to ask a question that you talked about. And that's salute to a lot of the people in the Jewish community that have supported the Palestinians during this genocide that's taking place. But you mentioned something, and we've been talking about this in our circles, how you don't really hear Palestinians that aren't in Palestine supporting each other. And people like DJ Khaled, I was glad Godfrey talked about this, and a couple other people talked about this. Like, you have something to say about everything, but your people are being, punished, at an all-time level, and you remain silent.
Easy. Well, that's easy.
Well, that's easy. That's easy, but
he's in the music industry, and there's no secret about that.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to being a fraud and a sellout, DJ Khaled, another one.
That's classy.
Hey, he had that ready. Right.
I don't know if you're referring to a video that I made.
Yes, about the Palestinians not supporting.
The point got a little taken away. What I was trying to say was that so many Jews and Israelis are marching for Palestine, but there are no Palestinian people marching for Israel. And I think that says something about, what's happening there and who's on the right side of it. Well, an analogy I was using was, if people that work for Pepsi are drinking Coca-Cola, but nobody that works for Coca-Cola is drinking Pepsi, it kind of sends a message about which product is which, and obviously which one I'd want to try.
Right.
So, but the fact that more people aren't speaking up, more Arab countries aren't doing things for the Palestinian people.
Right.
I mean,
that was my point.
In Yemen, who's stepped up and who's done something? Like people like DJ Khaled that aren't speaking out. I mean, it's horrible. I don't understand it. I think they do. There are plenty of people. There was an actress from Scream who lost her job because she spoke out. There was a big agent at CAA who had got fired just because she retweeted something about, I'm learning who my friends are that are okay with genocide. Like, it's crazy.
Wow.
And then there are, I guess, cowards like, a DJ, Stay Puft Marshmallow guy, and he can't step up for his own people and just talk about freedom. While there's artists like Macklemore who are talking about it a lot, and
at length,
Susan Sarandon, Mark Ruffalo, John Cusack, so
right.
many others who are coming forward, and there are plenty of Palestinian voices too that are speaking out against what's happening. But people DJ, that's bad.
But before you go, Kurt, I want to talk about one other person that you haven't mentioned who's really been grinding my gears, and that's one of your Jewish brothers, Michael Rappaport, man. I know he's in New York with you, man. What can we do? What can you do to wrap your arms around him and give him some truth serum? Because he's really saying a lot of reckless things and is totally off base with the vast majority of the takes that he's been making online.
I don't know what his issue is. Was a fan of his acting, like in his early acting, I should say. Higher Learning, he was fantastic.
When our brother John Singleton brought him in, you know what I'm saying?
John Singleton movie. So rest in peace, John Singleton. What an amazing director and filmmaker. What a loss for the whole world. He was so great. He also created the show Snowfall.
Snowfall, absolutely.
Amazing show.
Yeah.
And he directed so many great films. But yeah, and also True Romance. Michael Rappaport was in the first movie written by Quentin Tarantino.
Yep.
But now he thinks he's a wannabe comedian. He's one of these, old washed up kind of actors that like is grasping for something. He's like, I'll be a comedian, even though he's not. I don't know what I'm more offended in, that he says he's a comedian or that he says he's a Jew. Yeah, I don't know what his problem is. Honestly, I think a lot of it is just pandering to Jewish people.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it is.
Try to get more Jewish following or whatever, and that's where the money is. It's so funny to me because people are always like, "Oh yeah, you're just a failed comedian who's trying to get more followers from speaking out about Palestine." And I'm like, that makes no sense.
No sense.
If I was
you will lose followers.
If I was speaking out for Israel, I'd be getting so much more everything: work, jobs. So many people in show business are Jewish, like more followers even. Like if my family and my friends wouldn't ostracize me, I wouldn't probably. No one's losing work for supporting Israel. The people that are committing the genocide, that are murdering thousands of people, that have occupied Palestine and oppressed these people. No one's losing jobs for that, but people are losing jobs for standing up for freedom and equality for all people. It's absolutely insane. Yeah. So yes, fuck Michael Rappaport. Sorry, I let people curse on this thing, but I've been so disappointed on him. And
I'm with you on that.
I've watched a couple of his videos. They make me sick. I can't, but I've watched a couple. And he doesn't. What is he even talking about? Nothing.
Nothing.
He's spreading lies. He's just spreading hate. He's spreading bigotry. He's spreading Islamophobia.
Yeah, Jonathan, we come from the church, and the preacher is the best person at talking to the most intelligent people in the room and talking to the least intelligent people in the room. So we do want to remind everyone that Michael Rappaport is an actor. He works in Hollywood. He channeled that Remy character
really well.
Yeah, now he's like, he was a Nazi then, and now he's like a different type of Nazi.
And the last thing I want to say is, we live in a time now that money is king. If you don't have it, then your voice is not important. And I'm saying these things to point them out. And when you read any spiritual book, that's not love is king, which Jonathan started talking about from the beginning. Love is king. So even in every big church, money is still king these days. You see these pastors now, and I'm talking about our people, have jets and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm just saying that let's not.
They shouldn't be asking for donations from their place to go. I have a subscription service that you could be a member, but I wouldn't use that money to do extravagant things. Like if I could afford to do extravagant things, then I don't need to do my membership thing anymore.
Yeah, so that was my point. People don't even think about these days.
I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Absolutely, that's hilarious.
Great show. Danny McBride's hilarious.
Yes,
great show.
Yes, John Goodman, he killed. Yeah,
that's my guy.
Yeah,
Jonathan, I want to go back to something that I saw on your page that was eye opening. How your aunt ridiculed you, man. How do you deal with your family, your loved ones, the people that bleed the same blood as you? How do you deal with the persecution that comes from the people that's supposed to love you unconditionally when you're doing nothing wrong? You're speaking up for people that can't really speak up for themselves. So how does that make you feel, and how do you deal with that when that comes from your loved ones?
I mean, it's hard. It's very difficult. Of course, it's difficult to receive the type of message that I did from my aunt, where she's putting words in my dead grandmother's mouth, who
she would be ashamed of you.
Particularly close with.
Everybody's family has one.
Yeah,
that's just an ugly, horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
I think it really highlights to me the dangers of Zionism, how strong the indoctrination is, particularly of American Jews. There's an amazing film about it now called Israelism that everyone could check out. I recommend it. That really highlights particularly two American Jews who, like, you know, lived and died by Israel, and then they like discovered the truth about the occupation and the oppression of the Palestinian people and the journey that they've gone through. One of them is one of the founders of If Not Now. Another one served in the Israeli military. Israelism, you know, they've been trying to show it around college campuses, and they're getting canceled. People don't want to see it. When again,
not to cut you off, Jonathan, but what is it on? So people can go check it out. Or is it
I think just go to the Israelism website. I don't think it's on like any particular streaming service right now. I know they're doing screenings around the world, and I know that if you go to the website, like I know they did have it, like you could rent it on the website, like before New Year's. I don't know if they're still doing it, but if you go to the website, you could at least watch the trailer, get more information about it. It's a really good film, but I mean, it's really sad. It's really hard to lose friends. I think it says more about them. Honestly, it's like I'm not cutting people out of my life or like judging people too harshly because they are in support of the genocide or they are in support of occupation. But people want to cut me out of their life and judge me because I want equality for all people and want freedom for all people.
Wow.
Like
Crazy.
that kind of sums it all up. Like to me right there, where I have friends that are like, I don't want to talk to him. I'm like, I should be the one that doesn't want to talk to you.
Right.
Like it doesn't make any sense. It's so topsy-turvy. So, you know, it's really sad. It's horrible. Like the way a lot of my family has responded, most of them, how many friends have responded, how, you know, places I worked have responded or places I'm trying to work. Like it's crazy. But I mean, I've always believed that nothing worthwhile in this life comes easy. And I think this is another example of that. And I mean, I'd rather be alone and be speaking on behalf of making this world a better place and freedom for all people than be surrounded by people that, you know, don't believe that and think that they are better just because they were born in a particular religion, they were born in a particular place, they were born in a particular race, sexuality, or whatever.
Yeah. And one thing I want to talk about too, moving forward, I seen you guys out last night for Freedom All Rally. And then I also saw, I guess at the same time while you guys was out rallying, they were rallying in front of the White House last night. Talk about that rally and what were you guys trying to accomplish last night? Because it looked like you guys had a lot of people out there as well as our nation's capital.
Yeah, well, up in D.C., they had another big rally, of course, for a ceasefire and to support Palestine. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to that, but I was able to participate in a rally that we had in New York, which was an artist rally, which was particular, you know, of course, to end the occupation and in solidarity for the Palestinian people, but for the free theater, which I recommend everybody checking out, which is the theater in the Jenin refugee camp. A lot of the people who have been involved in that have been arrested, and they're in something that Israel calls administrative detention, which is when basically they're being held hostage by Israel. It's where Israel arrests you. They don't tell you what you did wrong. You don't have a trial, and they basically could hold you for as long as they want. You know, a lot of people say that Israel's an apartheid state, and one of the reasons why it is an apartheid is because, like, Israelis in the West Bank, they'll get to go to a civil court, but Palestinians in the West Bank, they got to go to a military court, which is very unfortunate. So we were rallying through Times Square. There was amazing performances. It was one of the best protests that I've ever been involved with. It was so joyful. You know, it wasn't about I didn't feel like it was an anti-Israel protest. It was a pro-freedom protest. It was to support the theater, to support the people in the theater that are arrested. I encourage everybody to go to thefreetheater.org is their website. You can check out more of the theater and how they're trying to promote change through art. Cultural resistance is what they are calling it. And they're trying to, you know, promote things through art, which is an artist, and which is what I'm doing, what I want to do, and I feel strongly about. And it was so amazing to be surrounded by so many other artists and to have them express themselves in solidarity with the Palestinian people.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to, before we wrapped up, I just wanted to, congratulate Jonathan on his fortitude, and I wanted to, ask for blessings on his physical, spiritual, and his mental, health as he,
I need a
deals
lot
with
for those.
yeah. So as he deals with family members, people on the internet that just say anything with what they think is no consequence, because we know all words have consequences and come back to the self. And I want to also thank him for coming on our podcast.
Yeah. And before we close, I gotta close with something light. You made a funny video about it. The Chabad Jews in Brooklyn, New York, man, in the tunnels, man. What was they doing, man? Because I saw Dante talked about it. Dante said it was literally like 3 blocks from his house in Brooklyn, man. What was these cats doing with these tunnels in New York, man?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for your kind words and for saying that about the blessings. I really appreciate it. I appreciate, all the support, and, I put love out into the world, even when it's hard for you, even when somebody comes to you with hate. One thing I say, I believe in, we got to kill them with kindness.
Absolutely.
When it comes to Israel, the only thing Israel should be killing the Palestinians with is kindness. So these tunnels, these Jewish tunnels, it's kind of silly, really, because they're nothing. They're the Chabad Lubavitch, they're religious Jews. The
Orthodox
Chabad is the place they have a tremendous hospitality for all Jewish people. They really want to promote Judaism. They want to get Jews to participate in Jewish rituals and stuff like that. They really have a tremendous outreach. If you're Jewish and you need a place to go eat, go to the Chabad. Like they're like that. They're very kind, generous people. So they have a headquarters, a very famous headquarters in Brooklyn. And what it really is, there's a lot of yeshiva students there, which are just like students that study Jewish texts, particularly the Talmud. And there's kind of a disagreement between some of the very religious students and some of the other people that run the headquarters of how they want to move forward with the headquarters. And some of these yeshiva students wanted to be able to get in the synagogue whenever they wanted. They wanted to have their own access. They wanted to, have more space to do what they want. And quite frankly, they're probably just bored because all they're doing is like studying Jewish things the whole life. And they don't really have any other outlets. And one of them's like, we should build a tunnel. And they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And they built it. Nothing sinister. End of story. But unfortunately, there are anti-Semites just waiting in the wings to make up ridiculous Jewish conspiracies. And that's kind of what happened, and kind of like got like some legs where people are just anti-Semites are really just using this thing that's really just benign. And it was really like a little ridiculous to spread hatred. And one thing that I thought actually was really funny about it was I saw these tweets where apparently there was a guy who for like months was like, tweeting out like, I hear Jewish people
I hear it under my bed,
under my floor.
Yeah,
he's like, I live on the ground floor and I have no basement. And people are like, dude, like, what this is weird. Like, don't be anti-Semitic. Like,
right.
Yeah. They had to apologize to him.
Yeah, what are you talking about? And then he was tweeting again, like, I know this is crazy. I live on the ground floor. There's no basement. I'm hearing Yiddish. There are Jewish people under me. And people are like, bro, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, don't be tweeting this stuff. And now he's like, he tweeted out, you all owe me an apology.
Yes, and they did. That's hilarious, man.
Yeah.
But Jonathan, man, like Curtis said, man, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your willingness to come and sit down and have a dialogue. A lot of people don't want to have these conversations, and I think these kinds of conversations are very necessary because we have an opportunity to learn from each other. We have an opportunity to see what it's like to be on the other side. And again, the more we sit down and dialogue, the more we realize we have in common. Leading with love, killing people with kindness. That was one of my mom's favorite sayings growing up. Somebody treat you bad, just kill them with kindness. You know what I'm saying? Yep. Smile and move forward. Don't even let their energy attach itself to you when you end up meeting them where they are. So I totally agree with that. And I totally appreciate you and respect you, man, because a lot of times we don't see enough people speaking truth, even if it's looked at as being from their own people. Because my thing is, if you're right, you're right, and if you're wrong, you're wrong. It don't matter if you're black, white, or whatever. You know, and I totally respect and appreciate you for doing the work that you're doing. And I'll let you have the last word, man. Is there anything that we can do to support you? Subscribe. You know, I don't know if you have a YouTube, but you know, follow him on Instagram. It's a great follow. You have a lot of great information. You have great people that you have on your platform that share great information. Again, like the people you were with last night in New York. How can we support you and help you get the message out?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with what you're saying. Thank you for those words about dialogue. I think it's so important. I think that's something, it's coming very strongly from a lot of pro-Israel voices where they don't even want to hear things. They want to shut down all dialogue. And a lot of people do that. And we've got to be open to having dialogue and communicating with each other. And it's okay to not agree with someone, but it doesn't mean you can't be opening to hearing what they say. We all have stuff to learn. I have a lot to learn. We all could expand our knowledge base, get different perspectives, get different ideas, try to understand where people are coming from. It's only going to help us in the long run. And, you know, what you were saying about, you know, speaking out against, I guess, Israel, even though it's, you know, a Jewish state and I am Jewish, you know, we far too often are so eager to point the finger at others. And we got to point the fingers at ourselves and our people and saying, what are we doing wrong? What are we bringing to this situation? How are we going to improve? Because we need to improve, and that'll help lead other people to improve instead of just being like, you got to do better while we continue to do the same things. We got to be looking out for each other. You know, this earth was here before we were. It's going to be here long after. It's not mine. It's not yours. It's everybody's. And we got to figure out how we're going to pick each other up to create a better world for all people, because that's what's really important. And yeah, please, you know, follow me on Instagram at Jonathan Randall. I have a Ko-fi. It's kind of like a Patreon where if you want to subscribe, become a member, I put out, you know, exclusive content. I put out content first there. I'm going to be doing exclusive Zooms. I put videos out just for my people there. And it's a community I've created where you can message me and, you know, suggest topics for me to make videos. So that link is ko-fi.com/Jonathan Randall. It's ko-fi/Jonathan Randall. There is no H in the John part of my name. Us Jews don't do that. That's like a Christian thing.
I know. Most people don't even understand that. That's hilarious. That is hilarious. That is hilarious. And I want to personally thank you, man, for getting that cat Coach the Deals in check on the podcast, man. So I appreciate you. I was pulling for you big time because he was wilding out a little bit, just to say the least, man.
Thank you. I feel like I went easy on him.
You really did. I knew you. I knew he was ready to turn up on him.
He might be going around to like protest, trying to do like this gotcha video journalism. It doesn't make sense. But I wasn't trying to do that with him. Of course, he's a friend of Godfrey's. Right. We weren't trying to like have the show been like an attack on him.
Right.
You know, I think he does deep down, you know, want a better world for all people. But unfortunately, he is a little bit, you know, one-sided with all that. And yeah, I've heard some other like horrible rumors about that guy. But, you know, I hope he comes around, and I hope that, you know, being in kid gloves with him, which I think I was.
You really did. Yeah.
Will make him be like a little more open to hearing what I have to say, because sometimes that's the way you got to treat people to get your message through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jonathan, we appreciate your time. Thank you for coming by Church After Hours, and we look forward to speaking with you soon, sometime in the near future, my brother.
I would love to be back. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Peace and blessings.